Hello and welcome to From Panels to Pictures. I am Paul and this is Liz. Hello,
Hello.
Liz.
Hello.
I'm sure you know us all by now. This is going to be a sort of slightly subdued episode. This is our one for the Eternals. We have to do it sort of slightly more subdued because although it's fairly sort of early evening for Liz, it is nearly midnight for me. So, in fact, I'm gonna prove it to you guys. I'm doing this in my pajamas. So I don't know if you can see my natty pajamas.
So
Sure,
yesterday
the
you had a
audience.
blanket during the podcast, and today
I
you're
mean,
in
you
pajamas.
can't really see it unfortunately because I've got like the camera's too high. But I am wearing some lovely red tartan pajamas right now. I'm ready for bed, and I'm planning to swallow some night nurse and pass out for about 12 hours after this.
Well,
I
suppose that it being a slightly subdued episode is maybe in keeping with the tone of the film in certain ways.
Yes, yeah. What a brilliant segue, Liz. You should do this for a living.
That's what I keep saying.
It is a slightly subdued movie. It's a very unusual one. Marvel keep kind of breaking their own mold with the new movies, don't you find?
I
Or
do.
it's not even breaking their own mode. It's they're taking the stuff they did before and doing something different. They're kind of breaking the formula, So even in smaller things like with Black Widow, we had a credit sequence and a song at the beginning of the movie. With this, we get a text passage, which is something that kind of was very emblematic of 80s sort of action mystery type of movies, adventure films, but you don't see a lot nowadays.
No, I mean, to me, it was very it was a bit Star Wars. Obviously it wasn't a sort of rolling text, but at the same time, it was a lot of world building via text.
And right away I found that to be one actually weirdly atmospheric because in my mind it's connecting back to some sort of classic 80s cinema and stuff, but also at the same time problematic because you kind of feel it's stuff that should have been done visually, or at least with a character telling you that at some point, or somehow within the context and body of the film rather than
Sure. I have mixed feelings about it because, I think for what this film was trying to accomplish, which is basically kind of upfront, just stuff your head with some deep mythos about these characters. Doing it via text, I don't think was a bad call per se. But this,
Sorry, I've just dribbled water all down myself.
I think in a way it also kind of sums up what the entire film is, which is a lot of information, a lot of deep mythos being kind of crammed into your head, consistently throughout the film.
Yeah. And it's a lot of kind of almost info dumps of kind of, as you say, mythos.
Because the Eternals it's as a comics fan, as a Marvel comics fan, I'm still not particularly familiar with the Eternals.
No,
but I've been reading comics for many years. It's there are some very famous Eternals runs, obviously, from Kirby to Neil Gaiman to now Kieran Gillen's doing it. These are characters that have existed for a long time, but I've never really encountered them myself. I haven't read any of that stuff.
I mean, I read the Eternals, the Gaiman Eternals, many years ago. Way back when I was hoping to get everything, like the 3 main volumes read. So the first Kirby, the only Gaiman run, and the Gillen run, the first Gillen run, plus a couple of one-shots read. before we saw the film. Unfortunately, I just didn't have time to do that. Sadly,
Same,
I will.
same.
Yeah. However, I don't know how well loved they were. I think this is one of those cases of Marvel picking not obscure characters, but lesser loved
Lesser
characters.
known, or lesser known, lesser, like characters that haven't necessarily been at the forefront. Like, I mean, even, we've talked about this before, but even when they did the Guardians at the time weren't forefront characters,
No. I mean,
and
I've said it on many pods before. I had no freaking clue who the Guardians of the Galaxy were at all, in any way, shape, or form. When they announced that first movie,
I think a lot of people had that same experience. But when it came to Guardians, the film made it really, made those characters really accessible and turned them into super popular characters.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I do have to point out, you may hear the odd, what sounds like an explosion every now and then. It's because it's fireworks night in the UK, and people are up to about half an hour ago, we're still having fireworks displays. So there may be the odd loud noise. Sorry if there is. I just got to warn people. It's not just, the sound of people raging against this film. It is, in fact, fireworks night in the UK. So, yeah, I mean, people, there's a strange kind of feel to this movie. Did you not find? Like, it feels very odd, structurally and tonally.
I did find it's so the director Chloe Zhao is known for, I mean, she's an Academy Award winning director. She did a film called Nomadland that I believe that's what her her Oscar win.
Yeah, which is also available on Disney Plus, as the Eternals will be, weirdly enough. So you can catch up with that now.
But I haven't seen it, but I believe she's known for her beautiful cinematography, a lot of natural photography in her films.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of that in this film. Actually, it's there are some beautiful outdoor shots that really are kind of unique amongst Marvel films. Dwelling on kind of the natural world and everything, which kind of sets it apart from other Marvel films.
Yeah, and in fact, there was a conversation apparently between Chloe Zhao and Kevin Feige where he was trying to encourage her to go the kind of CG route for this movie, and she shot a bunch of natural landscapes and showed him those, and he apparently was in sort of meetings going, look, she's captured all this and it's real. And so apparently they really did go to a lot of places. Although looking in the credits, it doesn't seem to be actually that many places. They filmed an awful lot of Pinewood, from the sound of it, in London, and I think maybe some in New Zealand, I want to say. Okay. But the film, location-wise, bounces around. I mean, we go to Australia, we go to is it South Dakota, we go to London. We spent quite a lot of time in London.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of sort of film, like a lot of the film Amazon is set in like ancient,
So we see the Babylonian period, the Mesopotamian period. It's a wonderful kind of kaleidoscope. We go to India, in Mumbai. How much they actually went to those places, I don't know.
Right.
I think that the thing with Marvel, and I get this, is they like a super amount of control over their environments and what they shoot. One is budget, because if you're taking like these now world famous actors, and everyone knows when someone's been cast in a Marvel movie, if you're taking these guys all over the world, they're just going to get mobbed everywhere they go.
Sure.
Like, it's got to be hard to keep the crowds back.
And I mean, and the cast for this film, you know, it has some real superstars in it.
Yeah.
You know, it's got Angelina Jolie, it's got Salma Hayek. You know, it's got some real A-list talent.
Yeah, and the weird thing is that they push, you know, Angelina Jolie is a supporting role effectively throughout the film. She's in a big chunk of the film, but it's still a supporting role. Salma Hayek actually plays quite a substantial role,
like an important role, but I don't know how much she's actually in the film versus a lot of the other actors. I think she's actually, her role is pretty understated when it comes to actual screen time.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's been a pushback against, because it's probably the most diverse cast Marvel have ever had.
Absolutely.
Which a lot of press has been made. And it's not just diverse in
cultural backgrounds.
Cultural backgrounds, thank you. It's diverse in things like
sexuality, handicap, or you know,
handicapable. We have a deaf actress in here who's wonderful. Actually, I really enjoyed her.
She was great.
She was great. And forgive us if we forget people's names. Like I said, it's like midnight for me.
It's a massive cast. It's a massive. Yeah. It's actually a massive ensemble. There are 10 Eternals.
Yeah,
and so that's effectively 10 main characters that you're supposed to be following.
And they did actually want 12, I believe, and they were talked down from writing that many. I think like a couple more that were written out before they started shooting. And it's actually interesting to see what they do with some of these guys. And again, I'm going to struggle to remember names just because I have.
Well, I literally just walked, you know, for context for anyone watching this, I literally just walked out of the cinema with it, you know, about maybe half an hour before we started recording this.
Yeah.
So
I saw this about 3 or 4 hours before we started recording. So, you know, I've had time for my brain to shut down.
See, I haven't even really had time to digest it very much. So I'm really reacting pretty viscerally to this. Like, it's, you know, it's a straight out of the cinema reaction for me. So if I do forget things, it's because I haven't really had time to digest it, but it's all very fresh in my mind.
We're back where we were for Endgame.
Sure, yeah.
Which we had to do pretty much. Was it Endgame we had to do straight out, or Infinity War?
Oh, I don't know. Quite a few of them, to be honest.
Yeah.
Looking back, you know, but so that's that. You know, I may forget things that I'd like to, you know, get into, but unfortunately, that's just the case. So,
I mean, let's start with that flashback to the Eternals first arriving on Earth. And they're battling these creatures called the Deviants, which reminded me a lot of the creatures Samael from the original Hellboy movie. And, you know, they've got a very distinct look. The Deviants are there to kind of not destroy humanity, but they feed off humans, basically.
Right. You know, there's a like brief scene in the classroom at the Natural History Museum where Cersei, you know, is a teacher along with her boyfriend Dane Whitman, who you know we'll get into at some point. But they talk about apex predators.
Yeah.
You know, which are predators who are basically, you know, the top of the animal kingdom wherever they happen to be.
And
the Deviants are, you know, that's effectively what they are, without the intervention of the Eternals.
Yeah, and sorry guys, again, we should have done this all at the beginning of the show, but we're kind of really a bit tired today. This will be full spoiler, so we will just kind of say it. So if you haven't seen the film and you're kind of a Marvel fan, go see it and then come back to us. But the Eternals were created by these beings called the Celestials, who've been there seemingly since like the beginning of time. And in fact, this film, we're told that it predates the creation of the Infinity essences and Infinity Stones. So we're looking at possibly more, you know, bigger powers in the universe. I absolutely love the way the Celestials are represented in this. Like, I
Okay.
think it's great to see something so enormous and all-encompassing.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah.
I love that it paves the way for who.
Sure.
Galactus, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I really hope we're going to get Galactus at some point. Although when we get to the end of the movie, I think to a certain degree it's kind of going backwards, but we'll get into that. But yeah, and you don't see Galactus in this movie, unfortunately. I really wanted to see Galactus.
Well, patience
Yeah.
is everything. It's but it certainly made the possibility of Galactus that much more tangible.
Excuse me. Yeah. It has. I'm not bored by what Liz is saying. Sorry, I'm just really tired. So the Celestials create the Eternals to guide humanity
and to fight the
deviants.
and
to fight the deviants, and they do this by representing kind of different facets of humanity, I guess. So you have Athena, played by Angelina Jolie, who is
the goddess of war.
Yeah, essentially. Or at least the basis for what people will come to worship as the goddess of war. And then you have Gilgamesh, who also is kind of, a warlike being.
Figure, yeah. His power seems to be super strength.
Yeah. And we have Icarus,
played by Richard Madden.
Played by Richard Madden, yeah, one of 2 Game of Thrones.
Yep, key characters.
Playing it in his natural accent, and his ability is flight and strength.
Sort of shooting laser bullets out of his
eyes.
Yeah. I mean, he is kind of Superman. There's a joke somewhere in there about him being Superman, and he has a lot of Superman's powers, and he's kind of viewed by his peers as the strongest member of the team.
Yeah. And the natural kind of successor to Ajax, played by Sam Hayek, who is the leader of the team.
The prime eternal, as it were.
Yeah. And who can heal herself
and
others. You've got Cersei, played by Gemma Chan. Now, it's interesting because Gemma Chan has appeared in the MCU before.
She has, as a sort of a foible to Captain Marvel. She's,
a Kree.
A Kree soldier.
Is she actually Kree, or is she?
I think she was Kree.
Fighting for the Kree, yeah. I mean, because that's never really, because the Kree seem to draft in anyone. Anyway, but she's. I wondered if she would be playing that character, and then somehow there would be a twist where later on she would assume this other identity. But there isn't.
Sometimes with Marvel, they just a lot of they are actually they've recasted or not recasted, but they've used the same actors in different roles more than once. You've got fantastic actress who played Black Mariah in Luke Cage. What's her name?
Woodard, but,
yes.
It's not. No, it's not.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Yes.
Yeah, and actually going back to I mean they
so she appears in
Civil War.
Yes, sorry.
I mean it's been they do actually recycle actors that have kind of appeared in smaller roles and given them bigger roles.
Yeah. So Cersei is really the lead here. We've also got Brian Tyree Gibson, if I'm getting his name right, playing
Phastos,
whose ability is to create technology and kind of make a machine out of anything, really. You've got
Gilgamesh. You talked about Gilgamesh. He's got the super strength. Sprite, who's basically trapped in a child's body, sort of Claudia from Interview with the Vampire.
Yeah,
where she's actually,
which is, you can't escape when you look at that. you know, when you look at her role in this, and then of course you've got Kumail Nanjiani
Yeah, as
playing Kingo. Is it Kingo? I think it was Kingo.
Kingo.
Yeah, and his ability is kind of, I mean, like power bolts, I guess.
Yeah, shooting some power bolts out of his hands. Makari, she seems to have super speed.
Yeah, she's the kind of speedster of the bunch. Is there anyone we're forgetting?
Oh yeah, there's more. Like it keeps on coming, Paul. So there's Druid.
Oh yes, Druid, played by Barry Keoghan, who is a wonderful Irish actor, very intense Irish actor.
He's great. I really liked him in that.
And his ability is to control people's minds.
Yeah.
And are we missing anyone else?
I think of the main team. That's it. I think we've got, we've got the core 10 players, and there are 10 Eternals that we're following, which is really quite a big cast.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. For better or worse.
So the kind of team is sort of equally balanced between men and women. Interestingly enough, it's the women that really take the lead in the film, which I don't think is the case in the original comics, as far as I know. I'm not even sure some of those characters are women in the original comics. But I'm happy to be corrected. If anyone can tell us down in the comments below, please do. There is this kind of, like I said, interesting feel to the movie, because you start with that right up, you jump, you're back in sort of ancient times, and then you jump forward to London, Piccadilly Circus, mobile phones, Gemma Chan jumping on the tube, which is not the first time we've seen a Marvel superhero use the tube, but it's still kind of weird.
It was funnier when Thor did it.
Yeah. So she's working at the Natural History Museum with Dane. What's his name?
Dane
Bowers?
Whitman.
Dane Whitman.
Dane Whitman. Kit Harington's character.
Yeah. And he is kind of already beginning to suspect that she might be some form of, enhanced person. That she, he thinks she's a wizard. There's some wonderful moments out of that. He's trying to negotiate her moving in with him. They're lovers. We see Sprite, whose ability is to form illusions in people's minds, and she is trying to, she's pretending to be an adult, and someone's flirting with her, but of course, she rebuffs that.
Well, only because, he kind of starts to see through her veil. He touches her hand.
Yeah.
And, it's an illusion. But you can see that she's kind of longing to actually be able to have a relationship with someone. She's lived for thousands of years. So, mentally she's not a child, but her physical body is that of a, like a young teenager.
Absolutely. And of course, you're not really given a massive amount of context, I find. I mean, you see them together as a team at the beginning, and I found what you got with this movie was a lot of contextless battle scenes.
Yes.
Like at the beginning. And then somewhere in there, and somewhere in there, there'd be like a credit telling you, oh, now we've jumped to 545 BC. And it's just like, yeah, great. But, there needs to be, I felt the transitions could have been smoother. So it jumps around a lot. And
it does.
What those flashbacks are actually for is to give context to the stuff happening in the present day. But they don't have context by and of themselves, which is difficult, I find.
Yeah, I think the battle, I think the amount of battle scenes was a little heavy-handed, particularly because of the CGI.
Yeah.
I think, because we have all of this beautiful natural cinematography, as you say, landscape cinematography that looks, it's very, it's real, real landscapes. The contrast with the CGI and the deviants in particular, it made it a little tough because I don't know that the CGI was the best.
Sure. I think that's something you can level at a lot of Marvel movies, though. To be fair, I think,
but sometimes, I mean, perhaps when you don't have it contrasted by natural landscapes,
yeah,
maybe it's a little more seamless.
And I think the movies where they've really gone all out and got it absolutely right were Endgame and
Infinity
the
War.
Spider-Man. Yeah, Infinity War to a certain extent. There were some things in Infinity War I was just like, ah.
I mean, well, Thanos looked great, and
yeah.
I mean, there were things like even the Thanos's army there.
Yeah,
I can't remember what they're called, but I mean, they looked great. Marvel could do great CGI. That's not an issue. But
I think though the films are done on such a clip, and it's the same with all films. It's like given an extra sort of 6 months and an extra sort of 10 million, it'd be seamless. And when you think about it now, you're at the stage where you can look at something made back in 2000 and I want to say when was Social Network made?
I don't know.
So let's say 2010.
Let's say 10 years ago.
Yeah. So you're back then. They replaced an entire actor's head twice. So you're looking at, 2 actors playing one, with one face effectively. Plus every single computer screen in that film is CG, as far as I know. So you're looking at tiny little environmental, and I'm sure there is a great deal of difference between doing that and doing what they're doing here. But there needs to be a bit more seamlessness, I think.
Well, I mean, but you mentioned the creatures from the Hellboy movie. When did the Hellboy movie come out?
That was something like 2004.
I wouldn't say these creatures are too far off from the CGI Hellboy creatures.
And actually, to be fair though, the creatures in Hellboy were real. They were actual physically done, I believe.
Okay.
They were CG for parts of it where they couldn't, create the movement of a creature. But yeah, they were physically done as puppets.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna openly critique the CGI creatures on this film because I just, it was a stark contrast for me to even other Marvel films. To me, it was particularly like not their best.
Yeah, and I think
especially because it was like essentially for most of the film, these are your sort of primary villains, as far as and there were just so many battle scenes, as we said, featuring them that it was just like it became more and more obvious that the CG wasn't that great.
It gets worse as it goes on, unfortunately, because something happens to one of the deviants that is critical. Well, is it critical to the plot? I can't really tell, but something happens to one of the deviants.
Right.
And it actually starts to get worse as it goes on. And that almost feels like that was a late plot addition, and therefore they just didn't have time to think it through properly and get it looking the way it should. So that some of that stuff is disappointing. Some of the effects are amazing.
Yes, I would agree.
There's some scenes, with Cersei, whose ability it is to kind of transmute matter from one form to another. There's a great moment where she turns a London bus into
like rose petals,
a billion flowers. Yeah, rose petals, and it's actually quite beautiful and quite poetic in places.
Yeah,
and I actually feel the film should have leaned even more into that poetry and into that kind of esoteric nature. And I would have loved to have seen that. And I guess I would have been more in love with it than I was. I've got to say, overall, I enjoyed the film. However, the levels of enjoyment were not as high on the kind of graphic equalizers I would have liked them to have been.
Right. Okay. I mean, like, me and, my, like, deep and passionate love for the Marvel Universe. MCU.
Yeah.
I have to say, for me, like, this was hard work for me by comparison to pretty much any other Marvel film. There were things I really liked about it. But I do feel like they could have done with like 5 or so less lead characters.
Yeah.
I feel like,
to be fair, they do start killing off some of those characters.
They do, but not enough.
Yeah. They're all kind of, because they still continue to keep them in flashback and things. It kind of,
it was very overstuffed for me in a lot of ways. Overall, there were characters I liked, there were moments I liked, there were moments I laughed. But it was just it was a lot of exposition, a lot of information, a lot of action scenes that I don't really know how much they lent to the plot, and a lot of plot lines that didn't necessarily need to be there.
right.
As you said, with that deviant, that whole advanced deviant character, it's like that didn't need to be there. They were just, I feel like they were trying to do too much, and then ended up underservicing most of the plot lines overall. And I'm I had positive feelings about the film too, but I'm going to get some of these negative ones out of the way because I do feel like they need to be said. I think I'd be disingenuous if I didn't address some of this stuff, by saying that, yeah, it had problems. It did.
Sure.
It was overloaded, and at times it was kind of difficult to care about anyone in particular because there were so many characters to try and become invested in, but at the same time, you couldn't spend too much time with any one particular character because there were so many characters.
And the real focus is the fact that, Ajax dies or is killed and effectively passes on leadership to Cersei. So it's great. She's now your main character. However, you also have Cersei and Icarus's ancient love affair, which is now over. She's with Dane Whitman, not Dane Bowers, the portly singer of so many dance songs, or producer, whatever he was. I don't know what he was. Yeah, and there's like Kit Harington appears at the beginning of the movie and then disappears for the rest of the film, apart from one scene.
Did you stay for the after credits?
Yeah, all of it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So he's entirely pointless. Like, there's literally kind of no reason for him to be there other than to be the other guy who disappears for most of the movies. He's not really the other guy because is he really a challenge if he's not in the room? I just don't like. That was stupid, and they should have. So you've got that. You've got Kamila Najani as Kinko. He's gone off and become this Bollywood movie star, which I loved. I thought that was
was very funny. I thought he was a great character. I really, his valet was a great character.
Well, here's the problem: the valet effectively becomes the
comedic relief.
Yeah, well, not just the comedic relief. He becomes the guy that other characters explain shit to, and that's fine. But that should have been
Kit Harington,
Dane Whitman. Yeah.
I agree.
He should have been, and then you could have had the idea of the mortal being going up against the god in terms of this, romantic triangle. I mean, they even fly around on a triangle. It's all there for you. I don't know how much more it could have been laid out for them, really.
Yeah.
And you could have actually made the film out of considering that you kill a major character sort of a third
Right
of the way through
away,
the film,
yeah.
you could have actually made the film out of these triangles in terms of the characters and in terms of the grouping and the ideals of the characters. Could have done it. Don't do that though.
They do
And
stand
again,
in perfect triangle formation many
and
times
they fly
throughout
around
the film.
and they fly around on a triangle. And again, it starts to look like X-Men comics and Apocalypse, because it is lots of people standing around on fucking rocks talking. Sorry, excuse my language, guys. I do apologize. But like remember, that's what drove me mad about Apocalypse.
Right.
Was I really went off on that, because it was just like, I'm sorry, you have psychics, telepaths, you have people who can shoot laser bolts and produce fucking power swords out of their back, and yet what do? You have them standing around on a rock,
exposition,
having a conversation. And you know what? It's 2021 by my reckoning. Yep, there you go, 2021. So the Terminator came out in 1984. If you want to have a look at how to do exposition, go and look at the Terminator, where all the exposition is done on the move. Like it just like that frustrated the shit out of me, quite frankly. I was so annoyed.
Yeah, there is. I mean, and some of the exposition is very clunky as well. Like, you know, I mean, I know I'm going off on one now, but like, you know, a lot of this whole Unimind thing, and like, you know, it's, I mean, it's just like, it gets kind of silly.
Yeah. And yeah. Sorry, go on.
You're supposed to sort of be able to follow along with it, but, you know, a lot of it is kind of hard to follow. It's like, you know, okay, they did lay out this big block of text at the beginning of the film, but as they go on, they kind of keep throwing new information at you that you're also just supposed to kind of roll with and be able to, like, you know, really understand as they're, you know, as their get out of the, you know, sort of celestial being birthed from the earth and everything. And
yeah, lest we forget, that is the major plot. The Eternals discover that actually what their mission is not to kind of guide and protect humanity. It is, in fact, to fatten humanity up so that a giant celestial can be born from the center of the planet, thus ripping through the planet, destroying it, killing everyone on board. I mean, should we go through the twist with the Eternals themselves?
Oh, I reckon. I mean, this is full spoilers, so go on.
So the Eternals are in fact robots, basically synthetic beings created by the Celestials to serve a purpose, and they get mind wiped at the end of the process and become, you know,
start fresh.
Yeah, they start fresh. Yeah. I didn't necessarily have a problem with that twist, really.
No, I didn't have a problem with that twist. You know, other things I did have a problem with, but as far as that goes, I thought that actually was like, you know, that works pretty well.
And there are some themes in the film that I think are actually put across quite well. So you have a character like Phastos who's trying to advance technology, you know, so he's back in the Babylonian times or the Mesopotamian times, trying to get the go-ahead for the reciprocating steam engine several thousand years before it was ever
invented.
Yeah. And he's told, like, don't do that.
Right. You got to wait for humanity to catch up.
And instead comes up with the plow and all this kind of stuff.
But then there's, you know, a later moment where, you know, he holds himself culpable for the events of Hiroshima.
Hiroshima, yeah. Which kind of, you know, it chimes in nicely with the fact that these guys, it's kind of low key mentioned that these guys inspired gods, or at least what people believed were to be gods. And you have, you know, you jump to Hiroshima, and lest we forget Oppenheimer's quote when they first tested the bomb, you know, I have become death, destroyer of worlds, which was a Hindu text. So it's a text written in the context of religion. So I thought that was actually a really nice poetic touch. Should they have pushed that further? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, the Hiroshima scene was horrific. Like whenever I see nuclear power being used, whether it's real or film, or not nuclear power rather, but nuclear explosions, whether or not it's real footage or fake, I find it terrifying because I grew up, as you did to a certain degree, in the Cold War era, the late Cold War era, where they were actually kind of saying to you, at some point, Russia might just decide to, flick a switch, and then that'll be it. You're gone. Here's what nuclear winter is going to look like. Have you ever seen When the Wind Blows by Raymond Briggs? Well, have we got a story for you? And that's what my childhood was like. And so whenever I see stuff like that, it's incredibly powerful. So one of the things that I think emerges is you have that silly touch with the mobile phone where, Cersei is addicted to a mobile phone. But you also have this thing where, Fastos is living his real life, but he's also living a fake life because he's hiding who he really is in one sense, whilst, out and proud, and, him and his husband have adopted a son and all that. Sprite conjures illusions to hide who she really is, and in fact can't reveal her real feelings. And they've all since given up being Eternals, effectively. Gemma Chan's character also hides who she really is, even though technically speaking, Dane Whitman knows.
Like, right, but not because she told him. It's because Sprite told him some things. Yeah.
Then you have I'm trying to think who else. It does kind of run through the film. But essentially what I'm trying to get at, and what the thing I really loved about the film, what I think it's actually kind of trying to get at is, and I'm going to go a long way about this, but so okay. Sorry.
All right, go on.
Is the move from spirituality to artifacts, where we have gone from believing in gods and we've replaced it not just with technology, but now I think at this point, as we stand November 2021, we are now completely living in an artificial rendering of life. And I think that what the film is trying to warn against the dangers of, in a way, is removing spirituality from your life and replacing it with the image, and replacing it with, now we used to have, I mean, religion causes wars. We all know that. I think it's very easy to say that. It's kind of an easy thing to reach for, but it's also true. But now what we have divided ourselves into is our cults, and we are living in a society that is full of cults and micro cults. And I in a way, one could point that finger at the MCU. One could say that is a cult of assaults. Now, whether or not it's a benign cult or one that causes harm, like Brexit is a cult, and like that is completely harmful, as far as I'm concerned, cult, or whether or not it's, something a bit safer and more fun, that's fine. Scientology is a cult. Very dangerous. So, Apple is a cult. Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. But we are living in a society of cults. And I think that is what the film is trying to actually tell you. Okay, that you are kind of moving away from spirituality. And the trouble is, when you remove spirituality, you need to replace it with something. But we're not really replacing it with the right things anymore. And I think that, and I'm not a religious person. Like, I was brought up in a very quasi religious background because of the schooling that I had. And Steph laughs at me because I've still got a Bible, and it's just like, yeah, look, like yeah, like it doesn't mean that I'm kind of, I'm not reading from the Bible every night, and I'm certainly not living my life by any kind of religious values. But if you don't, I think there has to be some kind of spirituality somewhere in you, because if there isn't, you might just be screwed.
Sure. I mean, I was brought up Catholic, like,
right.
I don't practice any religion, but
No.
it is part of my makeup. That that was what I was brought up with, and certainly
splash water on my nose.
Yes, certainly it's like, it's in, it's integrated in there, whether I go to church or anything like that.
I think that, over the years I've kind of messed around with various religions, some more seriously than others. I've moved away from a lot of that now. I haven't ever considered, going back into any of those. And if I did, it certainly wouldn't be any of the kind of sort of Judeo-Christian stuff. But yeah, I wonder if kind of the film is talking about this sort of move away from spirituality into the artificial,
Sure. I mean, because obviously we have characters who are, kind of very spiritual. Like, I feel like Gilgamesh and Thena going off into the, Australian outback and living, kind of off the land. And, there's something very spiritual in that.
Absolutely.
And, other characters to varying degrees. It seems like Druid, like, he also takes his, as you say, cult of followers out into the woods and creates like basically a commune.
Yeah, but it's whether or not that stuff is benign or if it's kind of malignant. And I think cults are by and large very malignant, usually because they actually cults of personality, which is something I really rail against. I really hate the cult of personality. I think that's something that needs to be burned down immediately, wherever it's found. So I think that the film is actually reaching for something deeper.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think, that's some of the better moments of the film are when it reaches for something deeper. I think where the film kind of falls down in certain ways is almost when it leans into the MCU formula.
Right.
And I feel like, if it had been a complete departure from the Marvel formula, it might have fared better.
Yeah, I mean, I desperately wanted.
I think a lot of people do at this point, for, especially for something like this with, with Chloe Zhao's background and the tone of the, of these characters. I think it could have done something really different, and maybe successfully if it had kind of just departed the MCU formula. Which, I'm crazy about the MCU formula. I'm totally happy for that to exist in most of those films, because I do think I like that there's a cohesiveness to the entire universe. But I think this could have been the exception to the rule, because, these characters are kind of so separate that actually it could have, just really leaned into her, kind of, her filmmaking style completely, and it could have worked.
Yeah. But what we get instead is
yeah.
I mean, you have the characters kind of revolting against. I can't even remember what's the god's name, the celestial's name.
So the celestial who kind of is their boss effectively is Arishem. The celestial who is like being birthed from the earth is Tiamat. Tiamat.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of, you know, what happens when man goes against God. And I feel in a way that almost would have been a perfect moment, a perfect thing to have Kit Harington's character do, is be the last one standing and somehow be critical to their kind of.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, I'm in agreement
actually,
with you
even
that
better.
Okay.
Sorry, even better, if just why I think of it, because otherwise I'll forget. I'm sorry, Liz. If there had indeed been a properly managed love triangle between Cersei and Icarus and Dane, then to have those three at the end have to join forces and defeat whatever his name is, the big celestial, like even better. You know what I mean? Because again, triangles and I don't know. I just feel like there was so much stuff there left on the table, and it almost feels like that's the negative side of having the story committee, which they do. You know, this thing that came from. So it's not new in screenwriting. I mean, all the way back at Rumbast, do you know him? Like, do you know, like, so he wrote about, so he has a story committee. He had all these like film students who would work for him as researchers, and they would kind of together they would help break the story. I mean, it's my understanding that he was the kind of overall arbiter of those stories, and therefore, and they were all paid for their work. And then you jump forward to Pixar, which really kind of pushed that thing of like the kind of story council or story committee. It's there in Star Wars now. It's there, definitely there in Marvel.
It's like, pretty, you know, it's for sure. It's like a common, you know, like especially with American filmmaking and you know, American TV series and things like that. You know, you do story by committee. A writer's room, exactly.
However,
like, you know. However, go on.
Sometimes I think maybe just better off having one guy with one
bunch,
or one girl with one bunch
cooks.
of ideas.
In and instead,
what they've all seemed to have come up with is a bunch of ideas that they could have connected with through lines. I mean, look, I've just done it in like 10 minutes and gone, so they're triangles, and you have that and that, and maybe I'm being too simplistic.
Well, I think this film probably could have used with a little more simplistic. You know, I think its main issue was that it's overstuffed and overcomplicated. If it had been trimmed down, I think there was a good film in there. But you know, I do feel like you know, it needs trimming. And as you say, you know, as much as I really enjoyed, you know, I genuinely enjoyed the presence of King O's valet, because I thought he was a real bright spot in the film. As you say, it's like that role could have been filled by Kit Harington a lot more seamlessly and a lot more economically, you know, and ultimately perhaps more effectively. And when you had them all there in that final scene, as you say.
Yeah, and when we're not talking about the role as written, we're talking about the role as a story device,
which is representative, you know,
of exactly. the audience. And you know, there are some interesting things. I mean, the scene with the conquistadors in South America is actually horrible stuff. And you know, where the conquistadors are just murdering their way through the Incas, was it? I believe I can't remember where they. And there was. I wanted more of that kind of meeting of the cultures. I mean, I always remember a thing I saw, I think, in a documentary where that posits the idea that when Columbus came to the sort of, was it southern tip of America, like the South Americas, first not discovered, because as we know, he probably didn't do that. But the native peoples did not see the ships because they'd never seen ships before, and therefore their minds could simply not compute a ship and what a ship looks like. So they just didn't like, it was invisible to them effectively. And instead, the reason they knew that something was changing and someone was coming was because the way the water changed as it lapped up onto the shore of the beaches, because the ships, as they moved, of course, were changing the direction of the water effectively. And I find that stuff fascinating. So when you see at the beginning of the movie, you know, the deviants appearing and then the freaking Eternals appear, I think that needed to be done from the point of view of the people, not the Eternals, or not this sort of omnipresent, omnipotent, or fucking, you know, this view of objectivity. It needed to be done from a subjective point of view,
human
and I think
perspective,
you could, yes, but not, you know, humans not as we know them, Liz. I mean, come on, like, so far removed. What do we have to do with freaking those early cultures? Nothing. But to kind of personalize it down, push it down into that, would have been amazing. And instead, you just get bright eyes, like,
right?
bang, bang, bang.
Yeah,
and it's just like,
I
man,
think there
come
were
on.
some missed opportunities in this film, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing these characters again, but if we do, I kind of hope they take on board some of the criticism that has been leveled at this film, because it has already, you know, I haven't looked at many of the reviews, but I know it's not getting the greatest reviews. And you know, to be honest, I think it deserves some of that criticism. It's you know, it, as much as, you know, parts of it are enjoyable, I do feel like it's going to be like, you know, for MCU viewers, you know, it's going to be more hard work than any of the films that have come before it, I think. So I mean, you know, I hope the next time we see these characters, it's, you know, it's going to be you know, kind of tailored a little bit. But it seems like we're going to see them again. I mean,
okay, so
as the film wraps up, you know,
shall we?
I think we should get to the end of the film and the end credits, because we're coming up on an hour now, and I think you know,
so the end scene. I mean, like, yeah, the Eternals stop, and you get that gigantic celestial rising up out of the ocean and out of a volcano and whatnot. And I actually thought, in terms of scale and scope, that was actually really well done.
Yeah.
And of course, I love the idea of she's in the palm of the hand, you know, and that goes back to, you know, for me, that takes me right back to being in the assembly hall at school, singing hymns, going, you know, he's got the whole world in his hands. And of course, he has got the whole world in his hands. I thought that was a kind of really nice grace note in a way. And yeah, I mean,
it ends on a cliffhanger.
It effectively ends on a cliffhanger, yes, because, you know, Sprite has now been made human by Cersei,
with the residual energy left from the final battle with the Celestial.
Icarus kind of banishes himself to the sun. You see him throw himself into the sun. Now,
whether or not he's actually destroyed, we don't know for sure.
Yeah. So Kinko and Sprite go off. Sprite is going to go to school. Just been a kick in the teeth. We've got
and Cersei is sort of you know, we see Dane again.
So Cersei and Dane, he kind of hints that his family history is kind of very complicated, and he's only just discovered this. But she's whisked away by what's his name?
Arasham.
Arasham, thank you. I'm so freaking tired.
to sort of have a reckoning for going, for
and in fact,
disobeying him.
all the Eternals are kind of whisked away because they're told.
Well, not all of them, actually. That's not true.
No?
About half of them, because then the remainder of them are, then left
Gone,
to say, oh no, they've been taken. What are we going to do about it? And that leads us to the end credits. Do you want to
No, I meant like of the Eternals that we see in the film, the characters that are left. Doesn't he? Because isn't there that wide shot where he's got all of them?
I don't think he's got all of them, because it seems like when we come to the end credits, there's about half of them who are who have to go and then rescue the others. And that's what I took from it.
Oh no! I mean, yeah, whatever. We're gonna get this is a rabbit hole I don't want to go down because
all right,
I'm too tired.
All right, I literally just walked out of the cinema. Maybe I have my facts confused. I don't know.
No, it's cool. So, and then we're kind of jumped into this thing where Makari and is it Makari and
Druid, Thena, and Fastos.
Yeah, have gone. Well, no, Makari, Druid, and Thena, because Fastos goes back home.
Oh, okay.
And in fact takes over the farm that Ajak was living on. So Makari, Thena, and Druid head off to space to find the rest of the Eternals.
Yeah, that's what I meant. When I said that some of them.
Sorry, yeah, okay,
right.
And they're there to warn them that, hey, there's something rotten in Denmark. You're not kind of on the mission that you think you're on. This is what you're ready for. You've got to, let's all do the time warp again and all that. However, instead, what we meet
is brother of Thanos.
Yeah.
Harry Styles.
Yeah. Now, I never got. Is he an adopted brother?
I don't know. I don't know how if they're blood related or not, but but essentially brother Thanos. Eros.
And we get
it's also called Star Fox. And
a lot of names. He has many names.
Many names. He has a little, a sidekick who announces his presence wherever he goes.
Doesn't that character appear in the Infinity Gauntlet comic series? I believe.
Quite possibly. Yeah, I can't.
Yeah,
I mean, it's been a while since I read that, but
I've got a feeling he's a character who comes to Earth and actually starts kind of warning people that
he's like
there's going to be
right. Right, but Eros is like the god of love, and of course he's played by the dreamy Harry Styles, who all the girls are very excited to see.
Yeah, it's very interesting commercially of Marvel to make that move, because they've guaranteed that whatever is in next is just like, I think to a certain degree it's the same with Will Poulter for Adam Warlock. I think he's
yeah, maybe so, but Harry Styles is like guaranteed butts in seats basically, at the cinema, which is why I think they released that after credit scene first.
I hope I'm not in a screening when it's a bunch of like fucking teenage girls. Like, I'm sorry, like, I'm not being horrible, I'm not trying to be judgmental or cruel about teenage girls. Like, I just can't stand to have a bunch of people screaming their freaking heads off.
Oh, I see. I was one of those teenage girls for sure. But I still am one of those teenage girls. Anyway.
But wasn't that Donny Osmond, Liz?
Oh, please. Yeah, right. I'm afraid that's your generation, my friend.
The Bay City Rollers, yeah? That's your...
No, think Backstreet Boys.
Do they really call it Puppy Love, Liz?
Yeah, right. I don't even know what you're talking about. That's how much over my head and over my age you're talking, my friend.
Balls. Balls.
What
I don't believe you.
What ifs. Yeah, anyway.
just descending into chaos.
Yeah, let's talk. So that's one after
Harry
credits scene.
Styles.
We've got two. So the other one is
Dane Bowers.
Dane Whitman.
Yeah.
And we were told earlier, near the end of the film that he has a complicated family background. There was a mention of his uncle earlier in the film that he needed to make up with his uncle. So this was something that was rumored a long time ago when Kit Harington was cast, and his name kind of came out, as a character. So people conjectured that correctly that he actually had a real comics character background, which is the Black Knight.
Right.
So
he's got a magic talking sword.
Yeah, and at the end, the very, very end credit scene, we have him opening the chest containing the famous sword.
Right.
So it's a
I know
weird.
Nothing about.
I know very little about myself, but it's like this is a character that's been around for ages, has kind of tenuous ties to the Eternals, as far as I know. He's not like an Eternals character.
Can I go back to the Harry Styles thing for a minute? Actually, let's finish the Dane Whitman stuff.
All right. Well, let's make it snappy because we're already getting
Don't worry about the time. Don't worry about the time. The Dane Whitman stuff. It ends with an off-screen voice that sounds kind of familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. Do you have any idea who that is? The off-screen voice that's
I don't. I'm gonna Google it. I'm sure somebody knows. Yeah. But at walking out of the cinema, I wasn't sure.
Right. And there's going back to Harry Styles things. He actually calls the Eternals. He says, "My fellow Eternals." Now,
right.
That's kind of because technically he wouldn't be an Eternal, would he? He'd be a Titan.
Correct.
So I'm curious as to how they've rewritten that particular bit of lore. Yeah. But the stage is set, and we're told in the end credits the Eternals will return. Now, I don't think the Eternals will be coming back in their own movie.
I have my doubts.
Not for a long
shot. I think with the reception of this film, I don't see them immediately rushing out to make another one, but I could be wrong, they've left it, on such a sort of immediate cliffhanger that you think they'll have to do something to address, what happens to the characters.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect they'll be back in one of the other movies, and or someone's TV show. I wonder if we'll see them in Guardians 3.
That's possible. I mean, because they're obviously trying to expand the the sort of cosmic Marvel universe with Fantastic Four, Guardians. I'm sure with the Eternals, the intention was to broaden the cosmic side, So it's very possible Guardians 3, although I already feel like that would be a bit overstuffed by trying to include them.
Yeah.
But I'm sure we'll see them again, but I also, as you say, I'm not going to hold out, a whole lot of hope that there's going to be a direct sequel to this.
Yeah, and I think that
unless it's starring Harry Styles.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for one thing, I think Harry Styles versus Will Poulter would be like Battle of the Egos, personally. I mean, as characters, I'm not talking about them as people themselves. Sorry, but the characters, I think it would end up being like Battle of the Egos there, which might be fun to watch. I actually liked the weirdness of this film.
Okay.
Overall, I think there were some nice weird elements to it. Which I quite enjoyed. I think it could have been a bit tighter, a bit leaner, and a bit shorter.
I think it could have been a lot of those things. I think it could have been all of those things, and that would have improved my experience.
Things that that you think this podcast should be, Liz.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now that we're like running into hour and 10-minute terrain.
Don't worry about it.
But yeah, basically, I think there was some cool stuff here. I did, there were characters I liked. There were things I liked about it. I think, it certainly, could have been, a lot shorter.
Yeah.
But there will be things that I look forward to seeing come out of it.
As always, I think more than any other, this is one of those ones where you're actually kind of waiting for whatever the setup's going to be at the end rather than enjoying the movie, and I think that's a problem. However, I think there were some things in it that I enjoyed.
Yeah, I like some of the ambitions of it.
Yeah.
I think it had ambitions that were like admirable. Whether or not they all kind of played out as you would want them to, I think at least it was trying to do something a little different, and that I do respect. And I don't, I'm not criticizing Chloe Zhao as a filmmaker, because I think, as you say, there's probably a lot of other hands going into it too, and I think she did make, this a very, it's very distinct amongst Marvel films in its visuals. So, yeah,
I think part of the problem with the filmmakers coming in is they're all great, interesting filmmakers, but they come in and make, I think sometimes they make what they kind of think Marvel wants rather than really going as esoteric and interesting as they'd like. But I'm very probably wrong. So,
overall,
yeah, I enjoyed it, but as I said, those were low levels of enjoyment. And I'm more interested to see what they're going to do with it rather than, kind of what the actual film was itself.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's introduced some really interesting elements into the Marvel, the MCU, and I, for that, I think, it's been a worthy entry, insofar as, yeah, basically now I feel like, the presence of Galactus or something would make sense.
Yeah.
And some of the, some of that mythos has been put into context.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting stuff and does open up the universe as always. But we are kind of in an interesting stage where I think people are not enjoying the MCU the way they were.
Well, I mean, people. I mean, I am. With this exception, but generally, I think there's plenty of people like me too who just, are really happy to keep eating it up.
Oh, sure. I mean, I'll always go. I'll always see the movies. But yeah, interesting to see what the future holds, as always. Right. We're obviously end of the show now. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and listening to us on the podcast. Follow us on Twitter at The Comic Crush or at Liz C. Jordan. We're going to change your little name badge there, Liz, to your...
I should really.
Yeah. I think I could probably do it from here. I'll give it a go. Just like I fixed that problem we had at the beginning of the show remotely.
Good job.
Sorry, guys, private joke. Yeah, do take a look at the website, thecomiccrush.com, for news on comics and movies and stuff and reviews and all the stuff that I write on there. You can check out more great comics writing, or writing on comics, I should say, from my learned colleague here, LizCJordan.com. The links for that will all be in the description when this goes up. Yeah. Have a good one, guys. Thanks so much. Check out the Patreon. Sorry, I'm bloody exhausted. I just can't be bothered anymore. Good night.
Bye.
Bye. We'll catch you next time on the Crush Show.